Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Emily Jocelyn. I'm the manager of our Circle program here at the Ringling. I'm thrilled to have you all here. And I'm going to say, even though I usually don't read remarks, I have so many pieces of information about these two wonderful women, and I don't want to get anything wrong. So I'm going to read the remarks to you and make sure that we get all that information in about our wonderful lecture that we have for you today. So welcome. Let's see. Well, we're very honored that this afternoon's talk will be given by Michele Oka Doner herself in conversation with Ola Wlusek, the Keith D. Monda Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art, and the curator of Michele Oka Doner, The True Story of Eve. In today's talk, Michele and Ola will discuss Michele's artistic practice and how the exhibition Michele Oka Doner, sorry, of course, my voice is going out. The True Story of Eve came to fruition here at the Ringling. Before we begin, I have a few important things to mention. Restrooms are located on this floor, across from the lobby area. Emergency exits are located at both the front of the lecture hall and by exiting through the main doors. Water is in the back of the lecture hall. And at this time, please make sure your cell phones are silenced for the duration of this afternoon's talk. And now, a little bit about today's speakers. Michele Oka Doner is an internationally renowned artist whose career spans 6 decades. Her work is fueled by a lifelong study and appreciation of the natural world, from which she derives her formal vocabulary. The breadth of her artistic production encompasses sculpture, drawing, public art, functional objects, video, artist books, and costume and set design. She is well known for creating over 36 permanent art installations throughout the United States, including Flight at Reagan International Airport, Arlington, Virginia, Radiant Site at the Herald Square MTA station, New York, and the 1.25-mile-long bronze and terrazzo concourse, a walk on the beach at Miami International Airport, seen by 40 million travelers annually. Michele Oka Doner's work is found here in the Ringling. We have 3 pieces, as well as in the collections of the Museum of Modern Art, Metropolitan Museum, Whitney Museum of American Art, Art Institute of Chicago, Detroit Institute of the Arts, the Louvre's Musée des Arts Décoratifs, Victoria and Albert, London, and the University of Michigan, Oxford, Yale, and Harvard University Art Museums, amongst others. So quite a lot of renowned places, I would say. She has received numerous awards, including those given by the United Nations Society of Writers and Artists, Pratt Institute, New York State Council of the Arts, and the Knight Foundation. She was first artist in residence at the New York Botanical Garden. In 2016, she received an Honorary Doctor of Fine Arts from the University of Michigan, where she earned her undergraduate and MFA degrees. Michele Oka Doner is the author or subject of numerous books, including Natural Seduction, 2003, Miami Beach Blueprint of an Eden, 2005-2007, Human Nature, 2008, Everything is Alive, Into the Mysterium, 2017, and Intuitive Alphabet, 2017. Her new publication, A Seed Takes Root, will be released fall of 2023. Born and raised in Miami Beach, Michele Oka Doner was designated Guardian of the City of Miami Beach's Centennial Banyan tree, and represents Miami Beach as the ambassador for arts and culture. She maintains a home and studio in New York City. So now, and I needed a breath after that. So Ola Wlusek has been the Keith D. Monda Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art here at the Ringling since 2018. She is the curator of Michele Oka Doner's exhibition here at the Ringling, Michele Oka Doner, The True Story of Eve. She is a 2021 recipient of a curatorial research fellowship from the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts for the development of Reclaiming Home Contemporary Seminal Art, the Ringling's first exhibition and publication of Native American art, which was on view here at the museum earlier this year. Wlusek has curated many significant solo exhibitions at the Ringling, including June Clark Harlem Quilt, Yalive Laforde American Roots, Howie Sui Retainers of Anarchy, and Natasha Mazurka Order Systems. She also organizes exhibitions from the permanent collection, including the current contemporary art exhibition, So Long as There is Sun, So Long as There is Light, which includes a piece by Michele Oka Doner and is currently on view in the Searing Wing. Finally, we would like to express our gratitude to the lenders to Michele Oka Doner, The True Story of Eve, some of whom are here today. The Donor Studio, the Archibald Biological Station, Marlborough Gallery, Beth Rudin de Woody Collection, and Wandering Eye Studios' Gordon DeVries Studio. Following this afternoon's lecture, I hope you will join us downstairs for a special opening reception for the exhibition Michele Oka Doner, The True Story of Eve, which has been graciously underwritten by Ringling Circle member Elizabeth Moore. And a special thank you. Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. And a special thank you to our exclusive media sponsor, Scene Magazine. And now it is my great pleasure to welcome Michele Oka Doner and Ola Wlusek.
Thank you so much, Emily. Can everyone hear me okay? Louder? How about now? Amazing. Okay. What an awesome audience. So thanks, Emily. Welcome everyone to this very unrehearsed, unscripted, and uncensored conversation. As I'm holding on to the script with the acclaimed artist, author, designer, and superhuman, the brilliant Michele Oka Doner. Michele, thank you so much for being here today and joining us in conversation. And I mean us, because we'll eventually have a Q&A with the audience. In conversation about your first ever solo exhibition here at the Ringling in the Monda Gallery for Contemporary Art. But before we talk about your exhibition, The True Story of Eve, I thought we might begin with the true story of Michele Oka Doner. And I don't mean to over talk as I usually do, but I'd love to take a moment to clue everyone in on how our relationship started as a curator and artist, and your relationship with the Ringling Museum, if I may. And many of our lovely guests today may not be aware that behind my skull is these two beautiful gifts that you made to the museum in 1989. We have Germinating Seed and Cocoon from 1984. And I'm mentioning these bronzes because this is how our story begins. So after you made these gifts, I arrived much later to the museum in 2018. And then I was tasked with curating from the contemporary modern art collection. And Michele's were some of the first works I gravitated towards right away. I thought, what are these surreal, amazing objects that through them really they made me think about this new location that I found myself in, right? Florida. At the time I came from freezing Calgary, Alberta, and Canada. So I thought, how can I get to know not only the collection, but also just the ecology of this area, the climate, this beautiful debris that's everywhere, the arboretum that the Ringling grounds are allocated as, and of course your work. So after seeing these beautiful works and working with them, I reached out to you. And finally, to get to my first question, could you speak about your early experiences, not only working with art, but also living or being raised living in Miami Beach, Florida? And can you talk about, please, about how you borrow from nature, from the world around you, how you create in 3D and produce works such as these two beautiful pieces? Hello.
That's quite, am I on? Yes. That's quite a question. And I'd like to mention they were gifted, these works. My first dealer was a wonderful woman with a gallery in Detroit in the Albert Kahn Fisher building. And it was on the third floor with these wonderful arches. And I was so honored to be in the gallery. I was 22 years old, and she was showing de Kooning, and she had all the New York school. And I met her and showed her my work at some point, and she gave me an exhibition. So we remained very close friends, and she relocated down here when she was in her 70s. And I gave the pieces to the museum in her honor. They were from my first exhibition in New York in 1984, and that was titled On Growth and Form, which is the title of a Darcy Thomas book on systems, how things work, on helixes, and how vines are growing up trees, for example. So that's how these pieces arrived here, and that's how we all arrived here at this convergence point. And I was born in Florida. I was born in the mid-40s. It was before television. I think some of you remember these times also. And children played. Parents opened the door, and children went out and rolled out on the grass and saw bugs and picked things. And it was really a wonderful time. There was nature in its fullness, meaning the Everglades burned, and that was a natural act. And I remember the smell of it before they started thinking that maybe they should try to put out those fires. But I have very primal memories of nature and being a big thing, not something that you close the door and turn the air conditioning on. There was no air conditioning. So to think about it as you have a mother and a father, and you have no language yet, and then there's Mother Nature. And Mother Nature was definitely my second mother. So that's how the engagement began. And I think most people had that engagement, but as time goes on and you go to school, you're brought into other routines and other ways of thinking and learning that are prioritized. So to hold on to that early knowledge is a real act of determination. And I think that I actually hid it for many years, but I never let go of it.
I had the honor and pleasure of visiting Michele at her home and her studio over in Manhattan, and automatically I was just seduced by this beautiful work on paper titled Nacre from 2008. Nacre is a material of which pearls are composed. It's very pattern, iridescent, resilient. It has this very seductive beehive-like pattern, lattice work, tile. It's just spectacular, and it's a real treat that we were able to bring this work here to the Ringling, which you'll be able to see in the exhibition. There's an essay that Mitchell Wolfson Jr. wrote for one of your books, and he describes you as a shaman. He says that when looking at your work, we sense the touch of an artist with a shamanistic gift, one whose ability to bring the detritus of organic evolution into aesthetic consideration in itself is magical. So when experiencing Nacre, one is at odds I think with their own personal scale, but also perception. And I know that previously, I think it was yesterday, we discussed this idea of micro and macro in your work, how you bring us closer, but then push us away, or that's what your works do anyway. Kind of similarly to cocoon and germinating seed. You also encourage common objects. You encourage them to be explored anew. You manipulate them to really encourage our curiosity. So my question is, could you speak to your shamanistic abilities and your skill of bringing something distant or less visible into focus? Why are you preoccupied with that? Such as this surface and composition of pearls.
Well, I think that the idea of being an artist came very early in human evolution. I love what Barnett Newman said. He said the first man was an artist. He picked up a stick and he made a line in the sand. So that's sort of my ancestry. And then the art supplies came from the other side of that, going into Lascaux and picking up the mud that had iron in it and ochre, and what did the artist do with the stick eventually, or with the mud? You expressed your hopes and dreams, and they did it for the community. It wasn't just for them. There was no narcissism, there were no signed, paintings. There was no artist market. It was a exuberant, joyful, fearful way of trying to understand why it rained so hard and washed things away, or why something burst into bloom the same time every year. So that's my tradition, and that also leads to the fact that I never thought that the supplies should all be at Pearl Paint. I much went into the backyard or somebody else's backyard. And since I didn't own a backyard since 1981, I was always in fear, but not big fear, of getting arrested, because I look like a bag lady. I've got all these strange bags and I'm picking up things. And when I sold my apartment in Miami and stayed with my younger sister, and she saw I was coming back with bags, first of all, she said, "Not in my house, there's bugs." So that was, And then the second thing she said, "And when you get arrested, that people have these cameras now. You don't understand. You can't go and take what their tree drop. I am not going to go to jail and get you out. I will not post bond." So she left me adrift. So I certainly would need my special powers to get me out of Dade County Jail.
May I share with everyone that right now in my trunk of my car, there's a random rock rolling around that you've also so-called borrowed from someone.
It's not random. What it is, is in the gardener's cart is a piece of the aquifer. So this is the coral that came 10,000 years ago, the last ice age. So what Florida is a bunch of rubble that kind of got drifted down from Alabama and Georgia, and it's very soft and it's full of holes. And the good news is the aquifer, the water comes up and it's fine. The bad news is the water comes up and it's not fine. But I love to have a piece of it, because when I sold my apartment in Miami, I gave my big chunk of aquifer. I couldn't move everything. And I thought I didn't need it in New York. Well, was I wrong? Because now when people ask me, well, why is it flooding in Florida? I just could pick up the piece of aquifer and show them. So it's a demonstration object.
So to audiences left, there are these ambiguous round forms, shapes. Their materiality and composition also appears to be deceitful to the eye. When first looking at them, I mean, I had no idea what they were. They are indeed made up of wood and organic material and wax. They appear heavy, but they're not. And I was wondering if you could please speak to the different materiality within your oeuvre, based on these pieces. They're titled, one can see that right now, Hominin Relics, and they're from 2015. They're in the exhibition as well. And maybe not only the different materials and processes that you use in constructing these beautiful 3D pieces, but also if you could speak to the distinctions or the boundaries that your work makes between what appears to be natural and man-made or human-made.
I don't think there are any boundaries. I mean, who invented boundaries? You know, it's the idea of boundaries was so that you could have reading and math and science and art. Now we all know that all of these things are much more connected and have more in common than they have in disharmony. So, in that sense, because what I was working on was quiet in my studio, I could make the rules. Of course, there were no rules except it couldn't fall over and it couldn't explode. So I've always been fascinated with archaeology. I was a fossil hunter from the time. Well, fossils would wash up, but then when I moved to Michigan to go to college, I discovered there was a Devonian sea under the rocks. And I went to, an odd thing happened. I went to Cranbrook to pick up my son from school. And I took him over to the Science Museum, and I saw this little stone, and it said 350 million years over from a Devonian sea. So there was no internet in those days. Remember these things? No internet, no air conditioning, no television. So I called the state police in Windsor, Ontario, to ask where Arkona was. And they said, you go to Port Huron, you go over the Blue Water Bridge, and you go on Highway 7, and you go to Sarnia, and then north. Anyway, I found this sea. I found the Osabo River. So shapes, hunting, and so all of these were shapes rudimentary shapes that I found. I put in a black trash liner. I took it on American Airlines. I didn't say anything. They didn't say anything. I always dressed up, though. I always put a jacket on so I wouldn't get arrested. But that to me, this was the middle one represented. I found it by the roadside in Miami Beach before the day that the big trash is picked up. And it looked like a heart from a giant. And this looked like a knuckle bone from Goliath. And the third one I imagined was a stage set, which I have done a theater that's used in big concrete piece in Doral. So it's hard to see in, but it should be cast in concrete and outdoors and in some kind of park. And so, in my mind, there was something else. I'm seeing them. I can take them back and I work on them. I'm always amazed when somebody else says, oh, that's really great. And they take it home, I'm not thinking about that other movement. I'm thinking about something completely different. And actually, I don't think I'm really thinking, I'm playing. I'm back in that zone where I had no language, but a visual and tactile. I'm smelling, I'm happy, and I'm exploring.
I would love to bring attention to your figurative practice and maybe starting kind of earlier on, the 60s, with these two tattooed dolls that we have also in the exhibition, courtesy of the wonderful Marlborough Gallery in New York City. So these beautiful creatures are made from glazed porcelain and iron oxide. And you know what's interesting? Your figurative forms emerged at a time when maybe they would not be as popular necessarily. This was also the time around of minimalism, conceptual art, pop art, which those three kind of dominated the art schools, galleries, the art market at the time. Were you aware that clay as a medium was less popular perhaps, or even marginalized when making these? Was that something that was a concern for you in terms of kind of rebelling against that or being in conversation with that fact? And what made you persevere making work out of clay and exploring the figure, which you still do to this day, especially when perhaps it was at the time receiving less attention from curators or collectors or critics? If you could speak to that time.
Well, first of all, I really wasn't looking for attention. I was looking to explore and understand the world. I was in my journey the same way as a writer who has a story to tell. You know, they're working on that story. It's the creative act is something that takes a lot of a lot of confidence that you have something that is of interest and merit ultimately outside of yourself. Or why do it? Because then you're talking to the wall. So there's a sense of responsibility too, that you want to, what you're making should take up space in the world, and it should be valid. So it's not just you do it for yourself, but you have to start there. That's the beginning. Of course I was aware, but I was also aware that women weren't in graduate school and nobody was using clay. But I was, and I won the Detroit Institute of Art award. I was at a show in Gertrude Castle with all her big guys. I just kept finding an audience which told me that there were people like me out there. And there's always been people who had recognition of another stream that had validity. So I didn't ever feel isolated. I never felt lonely. I never felt I was pushing something back. In fact, they were all welding I-beams. They left a whole territory open.
Could we talk about the magic of these figures in conversation with these three torsos that are also in the exhibition, Gaia, Teltrin, and and just the process again, both in clay and terracotta. But one thing that I've noticed, there almost isn't a straight line to be found in many of these works.
Where is there a straight line? I mean, like, who wants a straight line, you know? I like curves, and I don't make straight lines, and there didn't used to be. I loved that exhibition at the Met years ago. It said, Pharaohs, Architects, something like that. I mean, I think I even have the catalog. So you get there, and they say in the text panel, well, there's no architects. That's a very recent word. They were all engineers. They were all and they had the tools of how these pyramids and buildings were built, and they were so remarkable, the tools themselves. So straight lines are good, so things don't fall down on you. But otherwise, you know, look at our clothes and look at the way we look at the food, look at the way we live. You know, I'm back in the cave. A loft is a space that's undifferentiated by rooms. You know, rooms didn't come until the Industrial Revolution and heat, and people lived in their front of their hearths. and the igloos, huts. Straight lines are very modern. Anyway, down at the end from the 60s are graduate work, and this is about six decades of work that kept getting added to. And the larger pieces were done in a huge kiln in Germany at Nymphenburg. And what's nice about the training I had is that it allowed me to work with many places that and make collections for them, like Nymphenburg, like Christoffel in Paris in France, and then Steuben, for Corning. That was a wonderful collection. And Tiffany, I made the chandeliers worldwide recently. And it was the learning how to pick up a ruler and make the line if I need it, or hire somebody who can do that, like my friend Dirk, who's sitting here. So, and my friend who did the film is also an architect and a sculptor. I've always had wonderful friends who were able to do these spatial relationships that had to really stand up and last. So, yes.
The gentleman Michele just mentioned is Alistair Gordon, and his film is part of the exhibition. I wanted to continue speaking about the figurative practice as translated in paper or layers of paper. This work is also a little bit of a lark because it's not just simple ink drawings on paper as they translate perhaps on this projection. These large works on paper contain obviously recognizable human forms from what you term as organic materials. And then I found out it's a bunch of everything: dried leaves, bark, stems, stalk, mulch, dirt. Could you speak to your methodology as no longer only in the role of the observer? Because now, like you were saying, observer, you're no longer the observer of the world, but you're also the gatherer. There's an interaction happening. There's a method. Can you talk about how you're a scientist, how you're a collector, and what is your process when making these works specifically, Birth of Adam and Atom of Roots? And how did you determine the choices based on the specific paper? I mean, again, it's not just any paper. It's very special. It's a backup paper. Some of it is handmade by you. Some of it, I may never know what it is. It depends if you want to disclose it. But if you could speak to these works that are larger than life, and these are part of the show.
Special because this woman, Mary Ann Simmons, saw my work. She was a freshman in Ann Arbor when I was a graduate student. I never met her. And then she went on to St. Louis, where they have an 8-foot press. And she became a master printer. And years later, she got in touch with me. And at a fair, she ended up buying one of the clay pieces from the 60s that she had seen. So it's so interesting how it's an expanding circle, too. Life is both a labyrinth and a pool with ripple effect, I think. It's both ways it works. And she made this paper. And so I was invited by her. David Keel was the curator of graphics at the Whitney. And he told me about her and brought her over. And so I was invited to St. Louis, and I saw the paper. I loved it. And again, I sent bags ahead of time of stuff. And then I asked so that the material stays with the paper. Sometimes I ask for a big stainless bin, and I soak it, and I call it the swamp. And it's wonderful. She had 2 assistants, and these are the earlier works, and they had never done anything like it. And this one here is Adam from Roots. Well, why not? The story says he's from clay, and then there's another story and I forget what else they say he's from, and certainly Eve is made from a rib. We know that's not true, you know. So, and thank you, Harold Bloom, in the Book of J. So, but it's also interesting that they would have thought that there were like 2 elephants, 2 giraffes, 2, you know, 2 of everything, and then Adam, you know, like you think God didn't make 2? No, so we've had a rewrite there, just like Hollywood. So, and there are actually 5 versions, but the first version was, and he created Adam and Eve. So, and then it's nice to go back to material and create primal ancestry, or, you know, use the figure as a theme and go back to imagine what they could be made from. And I've lived with this work for many years, and the breakfast room, so she greets me every morning. And this one is actually in the Whitney collection, that piece. And it's the material there, I will say, because it's very relevant, because I know you have 21 banyan trees on campus
I
here.
think we have close to 14.
Oh, 14 it is. So, and so those are banyan roots that I stole from my childhood tree, but, you know, no one was looking. Then would wind it around into these loops and again stick them in a bag. And then when I got to St. Louis, they started screaming I was going to break their press. Can't do that. How do they stay still? I said, just calm down. So we then dampened them and put them through without any ink once or twice till they broke and they flattened. And then the fun began, because I shaped, you know, it was just this wonderful, having an 8-foot bed there and all these roots, and like, all right, I'll make Adam, I'll make a man. And he came first. That was the first one. And it was just joyful, because many of these things, I made them because I saw them, but I didn't have a pathway. And I didn't have an antecedent in doing this, or in making those early clay works, which to me were like coral, you know, the shape, the textures. And so it's an exploration, which I think is what all of our lives can be. We all have the birthright to have a creative life. It is something that artists, quote unquote, don't have an exclusive on. So, and making paper is a wonderful, I mean, it's so fertile and earthy, and it smells so good.
So the next few slides are of your 3-dimensional work. And I asked Michele to, you know, since it's really her talk, to send me some images of works that she would like to talk about. And she sent me a number of them. She labeled all of them goddesses with multiple exclamation points. So here they are. I don't have actual titles of dates, but they're quite beautiful. And Michele, I thought you could please speak to, again, the continuation of the figure, but this time in this very much so in the round 3-dimensional way, larger than life. Again, what is it about working with, for instance, bronze or cast bronze that allows you to communicate about, I don't know, our role on this planet, our relationship to like physical ground, earth, and our relationship to nature? I know those are such broad questions. There's also this piece of the 3 pelvises. We don't have this, unfortunately, in this show, but it's so beautiful, so powerful. It appears almost to be an archaeological find of some sort. And then there are these vessels you've also wanted to include in this exhibition. The palm vases right behind me are part of the show. The rest are not. But I was wondering if you could talk somehow about all of this. The figure, the idea of the vessel, show us the interconnectedness between them. What I'm saying is, tell us about Eve without telling us about Eve.
Well, it's all playful. If that's, life is a stage, and I need a vase, or I needed a cup. I needed things that started with fireplace tools. Those were the first things I had. My first home had 3 fireplaces, and I was using sticks. And somebody said I'd end up burning the house down if I continued. So I cast the sticks. But what's interesting is this piece brings in wax as an archival element. I went to the Met's Byzantium show. I walked through looking, and I saw things I didn't understand. This is many years ago. I went back and read the text panels and saw that archival wax was one of the ingredients. So I called the foundry and I said, "Is our wax archival?" "Huh?" They said. So 2 years later, they called me back. They said, we have archival wax. How much do you want?" So this one didn't have to be cast in bronze, which you lose then you lose a lot. What you gain is that it can go outdoors, and it's hard. But what you, like this piece here was cast in bronze. This is the unarchival one, and that's the wax. Look at all those strange roots. That it's such a strange piece. I called it Cro-Magnon 2085. So we were going backwards. And, I love that piece. And it's sold to a very interesting couple in Boston. And it's the only thing in their house, really, besides 2 African sculptures. And, it's a big old stone house. I love the way. So people connect to some of these ideas. They're all playing the beautiful black and gold mugs. When I was working for vessels, and you had commented there's a lot of vessels in my work. And above it is a ritual cup. I was commissioned to do a ritual cup. And that one is one of my favorite pieces. It's small and I can hold it. So scale, and I'll make anything from any material. I think you've figured that out already. I didn't put myself in a box. And I don't get myself into situations where I'm boxed in. So I don't have to put the energy into either running or fighting, only stealing. So, but back to these. So I'm working in Munich, and I see there are a lot of Turkish people, and the product that's put out by Nymphenburg it's the royal porcelain, and I meet the Duke, and he has me for dinner in his kitchen, and I'm having a great time. And then I thought one day, why don't they have one thing they make that addresses the situation? They have a new constituency. So I said, I saw a cup in the museum that had handles that were not on each side, but 2 offset. And I said, what is that? And they told me, here, watch. When you go and wash, hold the cup, pour one, pour the other. So you need them to be that way. So I then made these cups, and they were not interested, so I took them home. So they're now my cups. But I thought it was a great idea.
I'd like to move forward by talking about your literary practice. I mean, you are so well read. You live surrounded by books. You live with books on nature, science, archaeology, anthropology, poetry, but you're also an author. Some of your artist books are part of the exhibition here at the museum, but your latest book, A Seed Takes Root, A True Story, is available at the gift store here. We're so lucky to be able to bring it in. This book describes your decades-long relationship with a banyan tree. that begins when you were a young girl. And in it, you describe the banyan tree as a place for play, for refuge, but also a source of inspiration. So this story is, however, not only about your relationship with that tree, but also it's, I think, a strong environmental statement too. So could you talk about what was the motivation to write this book?
Well, when I turned 75, it was during COVID. So I was in Miami, and I went to visit my tree, and it was locked up under a cyclone fence, which it had been, and I had the key, which was a gift for my 70th birthday. They locked up the tree because the kids, it was such a little village, were doing pot and smoking whatever, lighting the match, and the leaves burned, so they had a fire. So then there was a second fence, and then the place where my key was kept, this is how life goes, was a building that was closed for the holiday. So I think this is ridiculous. I'm going to get to this tree. Who do I know who owes me a favor? So it happened to be Michael Hughes, the development person at the Wolfsonian. Always owes me big because, calls me. So I call him up and I said, Michael, it's Michele Oka Doner. I'm standing outside of my tree and I can't get in, and I know you must know somebody. Michele, he said, it's a Sunday and I'm in the garden with my husband. Wait a minute, I'll call you back. So 10 minutes later, I get a call. This is Michele Berger. I'm the chief of staff for the mayor. What can I do for you? So I have to go through this again. I have to pretend, I have to go, oh my gosh, here I am. It's my childhood tree. It's my 75th birthday. It wasn't. That had just passed, I had to say, we should change the title to Eat, Lie, and Steal, So then, when do you want to see the tree? I said, how about tomorrow morning? What time? 10 a.m. So 10 a.m., the Parks Department showed up. They gave me a key. Now, that's very significant because to have a city key, you have to be insured by the city and employed. And so I didn't get one for my 70th birthday. I had it locked up. They was my key, and I used to go get it. So that's how I got the key. So that was, but I wasn't let off. They said, you have to talk to the mayor, and on Zoom at 1 o'clock. So I went and talked to the mayor, and he said, this is just so wonderful. I didn't even know there was the tree. And then he said, would you write a children's book about this tree? So I said, sure. What do you say? So then the clock is ticking because his term is up next week, actually. And I was busy with other things, and I just had to get it together, do the story. So on the slide before this, go back one. Yes, I was looking there, and it ends on the word spell. That answers your question, your first question about the shaman. The tree put me under a spell. Case rested here. So it was, that's true. I mean, I would go and play in that tree, and this book says I heard the bird song, our original song. I heard crickets rubbing their feet together. I heard all kinds of things. And then I realized that there was this, so keep going, because I don't think you have all of them, but there is, the egrets. They came later. That's when the wet grasses came. Before that, they would mow the lawn. So then once I had that power of being the guardian, I could yell at the Parks Department, you stop raking those leaves. That's their dinner. They've got to rot and nourish them. They go, They turn to the mayor. Are we allowed to stop? He said, she said so. So that was that. And then there was the proclamation at City Hall. And the proclamation was handed to me by the mayor, and he said, may I call this tree your sister? So I thought, now this was how do ecology. You cannot shake your finger and tell people that they can't use plastic. They're addicted. There's so many things you can't do, but you can make the world so beautiful that they're seduced. And seduction, when that first book came out in 2003, Massimo Vignelli was designing it, and he says, seduction, you can't say seduction, it's sex. I said, no. My friend Mickey Wolfson said that's why they called Mussolini El Duce. D-U-C-E, Duce, is to teach. And so the original meaning of seduction was if you teach, you bring people to you. So Massimo had to let it go. So that was, and here are the egrets, my favorite birds.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Talk about trees and seeds. I really wanted to bring attention to this beautiful work that is a special loan to the museum for the duration of the exhibition from the Archbold Biological Station in Venice, Florida. So I, of course, chased Michele down to New York City, Manhattan, and then I had to go to Venice, Florida, which was such an amazing pleasure to see you be maybe the first artist there in residence, right?
Not the first. There's been a germinating seed of thought and awareness. So yes.
This piece is on loan and from Archbold, and we have a very special guest with us, Hilary Swain, the director of the Archbold Biological Station. So welcome, Hilary. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
I was wondering whether Hilary or Michele would like to say a few words about Archbold, the mission. What did you do there? What did you see? I have this photo of the facility. It's quite beautiful. It's very scientific. They're doing incredible work. But what was your impression of the place?
Well, first of all, everyone falls in love with Hilary. She talks to birds. She coaches the gopher turtle out. She's talking to you, and the next thing I know, she's on all fours screaming down a tunnel, clucking her tongue. So she's right up my alley, I did caves. She does gopher tunnels, But what's wonderful about this, it was a teaching piece that was there that Hilary said, if you look carefully here, you can see where they had a vehicle hit it, and here was a fire, and here was a fungus, and I wanted to draw it. So she sent it to New York. It had never left, and we did this drawing, and what was interesting is you can't really see all those thoughts, but they're there. There's some kind of transcendent vortex. The man who came today and interviewed me said, because I told him I was supposed to put them in, but as I worked, but that's what makes it the work of art, and Hilary was so generous. She said, it's okay, but the mission there is extraordinary because as the ridge, Hilary explained, is the highest point, and what the work they do really is about the future of the state. And she could tell you too about the pathway. Somebody today said they saw a bobcat, and I said thanks to work my friend Hilary Swain is doing. It's wonderful to be integrated with Hilary, with Dirk and his practice, with David. You don't work in isolation. You make with the clay at Nymphenburg, which is full of iron. That's I think the most important thing is that all these people, these generous, extraordinary people whose work and lives and practices like yours come along and share and integrate. That's why it's so special. Hilary, what do you have to say?
Oh, do I? Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be here. And like everyone else in this room, I stand in awe of Michele. But I wanted to say what it's like to know Michele as a scientist. And it's, first of all, we share a lot in common. Scientists, actually, when we go out into nature, we fall in love with that beauty. We are inspired by how attractive it is. You know, we're not all numbers and crunching and statistics. We are deeply curious, just as Michele is. We want to learn how to interpret that and understand it. And we may do that in graphs and figures, but it is greatly complemented by someone else who adds the artistic view of that interpretation. I liked what you said from an artist's point of view. You want your work to be more than yourself. And that's exactly the way we think as a scientist. And it's so wonderful to be paired up with someone who can see nature in ways that we have probably never envisaged, interpret it that, and complement what we're doing. So I love the sort of science-art alliance. And I'm so grateful for the day you walked into Archbold. And I'll tell a quick funny story and then stop. She arrived there and she said, I've spent my whole life hoping to find an owl pellet. She did. And an owl pellet is what an owl regurgitates. It's full of fur and little bits of bones and everything. I said, oh, I'm sure we have some owl pellets. So off we go rummaging around and we find a whole drawer of owl pellets. You had thought she had hit a gold mine. You know, we're all inveterate collectors, and she's as bad as any scientist I know. And we, of course, you know, take as many as you want. And she ended up producing the most wonderful piece of art based on her view of that owl pellet. And it was just a fantastic moment. And it sort of really epitomized, you know, the relationship between a scientist and an artist. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Hilary, for your words. I'm being very conscious of the time. I wanted to...
Want to go on
Which one?
at Arts Décoratifs.
Yes.
Is a roving said, then what year is this? Yes, and I also fell in love with the building. It's hard to see. It's the zigzag. Is the zigzag not part of this part? Or, yeah, can you see it? Yes. So the light in the studios upstairs is wonderful. And it's such a honest work building, kind of an elevated factory or something, that it's just, if I ever built a residence, I would use this as the model. It's just, you know, part home, parts, it's just so great. So it's worth going to visit. And they have a museum, a small area now that has some other works that are quite beautiful, that have been, you know, inspired by the flora and the fauna there. But also the trails, the walking trails, it's just remarkable.
So I can't let you go before talking about a walk on the beach. I mean, this is a gift to Florida, well, to the Miami International Airport, very lucky them. But it really demonstrates how your work spans from something very small and intimate, even handheld, to these immersive installations that invite us to commune with your work, but also, I guess, with one another and with the architecture or physical environment around them. So this work, we're looking at over 1 mile long concourse at Miami International Airport, made up of thousands of bronzes or bronzed images abstracted from tropical life, cosmos, ocean life, embedded in terrazzo with mother of pearl. And in Natural Seduction, a catalog, Suzanne Ramiliak, she refers to this public artwork as one which, quote, literally grounds our awareness in the earth beneath our feet. And I really love that statement. And she continues by saying that your work provides a form of secular communion, meaning that your work invites us to dwell with the forces of nature, and by doing so, or so doing, to better commune with ourselves. So I'm wondering, what did you hope to achieve by bringing these motifs of the cosmos, of the deep ocean, life, to a liminal space such as the airport?
Well, I do think that the airport today is where the pilgrims are. And I was very aware that there are more people probably in the airport Sunday morning than in the churches today. We are a secular, more secular world, and I wanted to provide an experience that, again, did have some transcendence. I think that's really what always the artist does, wants, is the hopes and dreams, you know. And what's interesting, back to the science motif, is when it opened in 1995, the first phase, my phone rang, and it was Dr. Robert Ginsburg from the Rosenstiel School. And he said, "I got your phone number from Art in Public Places. I'm with Dr. Andrew Knowles from Harvard Invertebrate Paleontology, and he wants to know if you know what you're doing." So I said, "Well, I think so, you know." And well, he's going to come down and give a lecture on invertebrate life, and we want to know if we can take some slides of your work. So that was really wonderful. The next call I got was from a priest who taught at Barry College. And he said, "I think that there's something here. I'm not going to call it religious, but there's something sacred here." So I ended up meeting him at the airport. This was before TSA, where you could go in, you know. And he published it in this Catholic journal called Chicago Studies. And I just loved, so those two moments, I understood that it was, you know, 1 + 1 = 3. That's the kind of math I always did. And that's what you want to do. So there's the answer to many things, really. The science, the why. It's a bouquet I threw back to a place I loved.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Are you?
One, yes.
I'll touch you in.
Sure. Of course.
Could lovely. Do people have questions for Michele? There's Jane is coming around with the microphone. Thank you for your patience.
When we at Pratt Institute, you'll remember them, recognized you as a legend several years ago, we were already impressed with the size and scope of your works. And to this day, how much does size influence your works as you start thinking about them?
How much does size, did you say, scale? I love the Sir Herbert Reed wrote a book called The Art of Sculpture, and there's a chapter called The Amulet in the Monument. So, caveman goes and sees a stone that's shaped like a heart or has a smiley face, picks it up, puts it in his pouch, and he goes back to his cave. He said this is the beginning of sculpture, both the stone and the cave. Case rested.
The question is, do you do work with children?
All the time, not in a specific way. I have 2 sons and 2 grandchildren who, when they came to the studio when they were little, and they found things I'd set aside and kind of hid until I hid away till I would get to it. Those are the things they found immediately, pulled them out, wrecked them. And then when I came in to say I didn't want to be that grandmother, whatever. So they said, seashells, what they called me. Can't you see we're busy in here? So they threw me out of my studio. And I do love children. I they're part of the cycle. So I will read the book, the children's book to children. I did promise the mayor that. And even though he is exiting his duties officially, I will remain true to his cause. Yes, it's this.
I have something I'd like to add to the seduction. I recently heard a lecture on Eve in the Bible, and it was trying to prove that she actually was a feminist and a radical. So I learned, and I don't know if you know this, but if you take the word knowledge in Hebrew, it has two meanings. And one meaning is the knowledge that we all think of as to gather information and to go with it. The other meaning is sex, as in to know in the biblical sense. So I wonder if any of your work portrays anything like that.
Oh, of course. It's all there. Why would I separate something out from the way Mother Nature intended it? Thank you. That's a very nice insight.
First of all, thank you for your generosity and sharing your process and your heart with us. I'm very happy to be here today to help welcome you to Sarasota on behalf of my mother-in-law, Marcia Salkin, and David. We'd call this more of a testimonial, but to share what it's like to work with Michele to bring space and architecture and art together. My very first project, my very first house, we worked together, for which she created the threshold, the walkway, as you come to the home. To more recently, we've just completed the heart, the courtyard, and a fountain that is both laughing and crying at the same time. And what I would say is, will be a surprise to none of you, that it's the gift that comes is in my clients having the opportunity to meet and know Michele. We always visit the studio, and the process starts with a conversation. And when they pass over the threshold or arrive at the heart, they have the enrichment that you've given them personally. Thank you for that gift.
Sweet. So they keep really moving.
All right, maybe this is the time to invite everyone to preview the exhibition, Michele Oka Doner, The True Story of Eve. Thank you so much for being here, Michele. Thank you a million times.
Thank you.
No, thank
really.
you.
Yes.
We don't deserve you.
You see the sweet.